Paladin preview? It's early? Blah? Alright, diving right into discussion for this week. One of the big complaints that I've been seeing from a lot of people, particularly Shaman, because of the mages with Bloodlust and that whole thing going on. One of the big complaints I've been seeing from a lot of people is, well, if my buff isn't worth bringing me to the raid anymore, then why bother bringing me to the raid? And that's not really a good way to think about things. In fact, that's a pretty bad situation for you to be in personally. If your guild is only bringing you to the raid because you have Bloodlust or you have Sunder Armor or whatever, and would happily and readily drop you for anyone else who brings that buff, you probably don't deserve your raid spot. I'm just going to go out on a limb there and say you're probably in a position that you're in just because they're really, really hard up for people. Generally speaking, and this is actually a line I'm taking from Ghostcrawler here, you shouldn't be brought to the raid because you have a beautiful and unique snowflake buff. You should be brought to the raid because you know what the hell you're doing. I mean, if you're a good player, if you know how to play your class, if you're good at what you do, just because the mage has Bloodlust doesn't all of a sudden mean that, oh, we're not bringing Shaman anymore, mages are the cool thing now. No, that's not what's going to happen. Look, if you're decent at your class, and if you're good at what you do, you will have a raid spot. The reason I bring people to my raids, and the reason most people bring most people to their raids, even in pugs, honestly, is because they want somebody in the raid that they know is going to perform. It doesn't matter what buffs you got. I mean, obviously in a pug, you're going to run into situations where you're like, oh, well, we need Bloodlust, so we need to invite a Shaman. I'm sorry, Mr. Paladin man, you can't come. We're going to bring this Shaman instead. But honestly, this is going to make that an even better situation as far as that goes, because... Okay, take a different example. Say you're a shaman and they've already got one, and they don't want to bring you because instead they need kings. So they're saying, okay, well, we need a paladin because we need to get kings in here. Now, say the same thing happens. This is a little thing that they've been hinting at. Say the same thing happens to Bloodlust as happens to kings. There was something that Ghostcrawler mentioned a little while ago, suggesting that they might look into making Mark of the Wild and kings basically the same thing. Because I mean, Mark of the Wild is already a flat stat increase. All they have to do is change it to be 10%, and it's the same buff. So what happens if that happens? And right now, Mr. Shaman with your Bloodlust, you're not getting invited because they need the paladin. They don't need the extra shaman. So it's kind of it can swing both ways in that regard as far as getting invited to pugs. And in a guild, like I said, if the only reason you're in the raid is because you have a buff that they need, then you're just dragging everybody else down. You need to be in the raid because you're a solid player. I also wanted to touch just real briefly on the situation of Resto Druids. A lot of you guys looked at the Shaman preview, the Priest preview, and now the Paladin preview and went, what the crap, where's all my new stuff? And that's an understandable position to be in. I don't think that Resto Druids are just not going to get any changes, though. I mean, obviously they're pushing everybody towards this new model of healing in Cataclysm. There's no reason that Resto Druids are the ones that just, for whatever reason, get forgotten and left behind and no changes whatsoever. And you'd be pretty overpowered if they did that. So, I think what's going to happen with Resto Druids is you're going to see a lot more of the sort of redundancies and just bleed over between different spells worked out so that each spell gets carved into its own little niche, and you don't end up with, Healing Touch versus Nourish. Well, Nourish is just better every time you want to cast a direct target heal, so why ever cast Healing Touch? I think that's the direction that they're going to end up playing, and they're going to start working with all the spells that the Druid already has and make sure all of those are interesting and good spells to cast, instead of just having these extra spells that you're just never interested in and then adding more onto the pile. Okay, Paladins. I have a whole lot of stuff I want to get through, and I don't have a whole lot of time left, so I will be swift. But first, before I get into anything else, I just want to say real quick, I have complete and utmost faith in the Blizzard design team to be able to make things work. I have some concerns, which I'll talk about in a minute. But when I say that, I'm not saying like, OMG Blizzard, why are you ruining the Paladin class? That's not where I'm coming from at all. If I voice a concern, all I'm saying is that's something that they're going to be watching for in beta, and they're just going to have to put a little effort into making sure it actually all lines up the way they want it to. So, with that said, let's move on. Alright, so the first thing I want to really talk about is the new Guardian of Ancient Kings ability. I'm kind of skeptical of where this one is headed. Basically, the idea behind it is to give Paladins a sort of extra cooldown for basically everything. For Holy, it summons a little guy that comes out and heals for you. For Prod, it comes out and summons a little guy that absorbs some damage for you. And for Ret, it summons a little guy that presumably comes out and whacks at the boss's ankles a little bit. It can be really cool if they make summoning him something awesome, like he shows up and he's like, boom, I'm here, I'm a badass, and he's like, hey, I'm saving your life, man, or, you know, hey, I'm absorbing all your damage, or he just comes out like maybe with a big sword or something and just goes, like that would be awesome if it was just something that huge and fantastic, and maybe he was only there for like 3 or 4 seconds and then went away and everybody in the raid was like, oh, that was the coolest thing I've ever seen in my life, and then you wipe because everybody's staring at it, but still, that was the coolest thing I've ever seen in my life. That could be cool if it's something that just comes out and he's like, yeah, I'm awesome for just a few seconds and then he leaves. If it's another gargoyle or, you know, Nibelungstaff Valkyr thing or something that just kind of comes out and he's like, hey, I'm here. What are we doing? That sucks. I don't want that. I want it to be something awesome. So hopefully, Blizzard, if you're watching this, please make it awesome, because I really want it to be awesome. They're also moving a couple of the talented abilities to be baseline, specifically Crusader Strike and Holy Shock, and that's interesting for a couple of reasons to me. For one, it makes leveling a Paladin a lot more of an enjoyable process. Somebody wrote me half a book over Twitter about how it was stupid because leveling a Paladin was already really easy, and yes, leveling a Paladin is easy. That's not the point. Leveling a Paladin is boring. You have like one button to push for like 35 to 40 levels, because anything else you're just draining your mana and you can't earn it back fast enough to actually do anything with. So giving a Paladin a couple of other abilities to just have something to do while leveling is a really, really good thing. The other thing specifically with Holy Shock that's interesting is adding Holy Shock to Protection and Retribution, mostly Protection, could be kind of could be really overpowered, actually, depending on how it ends up scaling. Or it could just be awful, but it could end up being pretty decent. I mean, you imagine it's what, a 6-second cooldown? A tank that's able to heal themselves for, you know, 4 or 5k every few seconds, especially with the way that healing is going in Cataclysm. That's significant. Could end up being, you know, something that's kind of a point of contention in online discussions. We'll have to see how that works out in beta, but it's definitely something to keep an eye on. In the prop front, the block stuff I found pretty interesting, very surprising actually. I was not expecting Holy Shield to maintain its ability to basically make a Paladin block everything, and it seems like that's the direction they're going in. The reason that concerns me is because when you're knocking off 30% of every physical damage attack that's coming in, or basically everything that can be blocked at least, it's like having shield wall up all the time, especially since the prot mastery, the stat bonus, increases your block value basically even more. So that's going to be something to keep an eye on, because that's kind of nuts, that amount of just raw damage reduction effect through your shield. So that'll be interesting to see. The last thing I really wanted to talk about was just a little kind of a footnote that they made regarding Retribution, and that they need to add some way in there for Ret to mess up. And I 100% completely agree with that design intent. I am absolutely just super stoked that they've included that in there. My biggest problem with Retribution for the whole expansion has been that the difference between a Ret Paladin who's doing his absolute best possible priority system and his absolute worst possible priority system, as long as you're still, you know, using all of your GCDs, the DPS difference is like 1k at the most. And when you're getting into Ice Crown and you're doing like 10k to 11k, that's like a rounding error. That's not even anything that anyone cares about. My crit rate, if I just happen to get lucky, can account for that much damage. So adding that extra thing in there, allowing Paladins to be bad at DPS, will then allow Paladins to be good at DPS. There has to be a difference between those two, you know, classes of players, basically. So that has me super excited, and I'm really interested to see what kind of ideas they come up with to actually be able to accomplish that goal. Alright, once again, I'm cutting it absolutely right down to the wire, so thank you all very much for watching. I will see you once again next week.